You found the skeleton. How would you tell people that this happened? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do research on that.
All right, everybody. We are here. Don't worry. I know that there has been some concern. Bent Hovind, no relation, is not ill. He's not injured. He's fine. However, there was a meeting that he had to go to regarding his band and possible promotion, and maybe something about a label being interested. And the only time that everyone could be there was around this time. So instead of Bent, we have my friend Josh, who has been here before. He's on YouTube as Sphincter of Doom. Although, Josh, I don't think you actually have a channel, do you?
I mean, I have a YouTube account, but I don't really have a channel now.
Yeah, there's no videos to go watch, are there?
No.
Okay. So, if there were, I would link you, but if there's no videos to watch, I'm not gonna. But so don't worry, Bent is fine. He will be back. He is not ill. He is talking about someone who might be willing to promote his music, sell albums, play it on the radio in other parts of the country, other than the local area. So, whoa, that was loud.
Sorry, I was trying to cover my mic before I sneezed.
Well, okay, just mute before instead on Discord. That'll be easier.
I wasn't fast enough.
Got it. Anyway, so yes, we are here. We're actually just going to start with the next class 4 for Creation Science Evangelism 101. Basically, I took a look at the remaining 14 or so minutes of the previous class, and it was just rehashing other things he'd already said and then preaching. So I made the executive decision to skip all of that and not subject you to it. There you go. So we are going to go over the drinking rules real quick. So our first drinking rule is that whenever Kent gets something that's actually correct, and he's not just quoting someone, we take a drink. We take a drink whenever it's too stupid and we just kind of have to, which is pretty frequent. But it can't be just everything he gets wrong, because he just gets things casually wrong so often. Let's see. We also drink whenever Kent tells a joke that falls flat, which is most of his jokes. And then we also inject a little bit of randomness into it, where we drink whenever one of the Toho Kaiju come around, which, Josh, if you could help demonstrate for me, that would be amazing.
All right, one moment.
So, we have two forms, right? Oh, there's Godzilla. So that's our first drink trigger of the night. Mothra may also come around. So, yeah. Now, I want to say that the Dapper Dino channel and Kent with Bent and even Kent without Bent does not encourage you to drink along with us, and we take no responsibility for any loss of limb, life, or property that you may suffer. You play along at your own risk. I am not telling you to do this. I'm just telling you what I am planning to do. So, there you go. Stupid Horror Energy says, I'm not watching you till you fire that Geth. Oh, come on. In most of my playthroughs, I end up being friends with the Geth. Besides, I can't fire the one Geth. That's just firing all of them. That's how the Geth work. But let's just get into it. I don't know exactly how much of this opening sequence we're going to have to sit through just to get to Kent's opener, but it's not too long. I've already skipped most of it. And you guys should thank me because I have an audio filter on my desktop audio.
Well, welcome to class number 4.
Welcome, because there's a high-pitched whine in the background that you can't hear.
We're slowing our seminar way down, giving lots more detail, hopefully, and lots more information. In this this session and probably the next couple, we're going to talk about the age of the Earth. What I normally cover on my video number 1B, what we call 1B, the second seminar. How old is the Earth anyway? The Bible says, in the beginning. Now, when was the beginning? Let's stop right there. How old is the Earth? It is an extremely important question. Christians are very much divided over this issue. How old is the Earth?
It is, well, it's true in some cases and it's not true in others. There are definitely, most Christian groups do not spend time talking about how old the Earth is, because it's not something they see as relevant to anything. Oh! Take a drink. So, like, if you were to ask, like, let's say you went back to the year 1100, right? So at this point, what would become the Eastern Orthodox Church and what would become the Catholic Church have been split from each other for a bit under 40 years. And there's a lot of bad blood between them. And there's a lot of arguing and bickering and accusations, and a lot of the accusations are accurate on both sides, by the way. But if you ask them whether or not anything that is, separating them has to do with the age of the Earth, you're like, what are you talking about? No one cares. It's not a thing that we care about in terms of, like, theology. And even if you were to go to, say, like modern mainline Protestant churches, like Lutherans or Presbyterians in most cases, as far as I know, most of those groups don't have any official proclamation as to how old the Earth is. But if you were to tell them that, like, you wanted to go branch off and start your own new church because you thought the Earth was 8,000 years old, but your priest or pastor or whatever was saying that it was 6,000 years old, they would all think that was really weird. Oh, and yes, Lady Lumo points out that I accidentally went live on Top Hats Off. So basically what happened was I forgot to change my stream key. And so when I was starting this stream, I actually ended up streaming to Top Hats Off. There is essentially no content on that, so there you go. And yeah, Stupid Horror Energy, this is a VHS rip, which is why it is terrible. But here we go. So yeah, there are basically the only Christians who find the age of the Earth to be a thing worth splitting over are YECs, and hardcore YECs.
100 years ago, the division wasn't so bad.
Oh,
or maybe 200 years ago.
You know what? I'll take a drink to that. Good job, Kent. You got that right. I didn't expect you to.
Yeah, Kent often gets documented history pretty accurately, and that's where it ends very closely. Like, any conclusions properly drawn from that is where it falls apart.
Kent might be better at history than Richard Dawkins, who's abysmal at history, which is sad, but what are you going to do?
Everybody believed exactly what the Bible says, about 6,000 years for the age of the Earth. But then when they began teaching the Earth is billions of years old, Christians began to divide into two camps, those who stuck with what the Bible said, and those who accepted what some of the scientists were saying, and tried to make the Bible say the Earth is billions of years old. And we'll get into more of that later.
Yeah, just like when, scientists said that the Earth is a globe, even though the Old Testament clearly assumes that it's not. Yeah, people didn't stick with what the Bible at least assumed. I'm not going to say that it's there to teach you. Oh, let me drink.
Yeah, and Claire Patterson's work wasn't until the 1950s anyway.
Oh my goodness. Godzilla is upset about something. I think, what it probably is? He's probably bugged by the fact that it's now going to be like over a year delay for his next movie.
That would put anybody in a bad mood.
Yeah, that movie, Godzilla vs. Kong, that thing has been done for nearly a year now. And it's just not out. It's just been sitting in the vault over at Legendary Pictures. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so the thing is, Kent himself doesn't believe what the Bible says about a lot of stuff. Like, Kent doesn't believe that the Earth is set on pillars and is unmovable. He doesn't believe that there's a firmament dome in the sky with floodgates that are opened to let in the rains for the Noah's flood, or just the rains in general. But the thing is, if you... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like... Now, this is just me trying to play, like, devil's advocate for Kent, is that if something is demonstrably the case in science, that's convinced him, he's like, okay, well, the Bible was being metaphorical. And if he's not convinced, then he just takes the Bible literally, which seems like a lot of YECs do, where if they're just, and things like evolution and age of the Earth are a little less intuitive, then, you can see that it's clearly like the Earth is round, unless you're a crazy flat earther, or you can see, like, when you see pictures from the moon, it's not resting on pillars, kind of thing.
Well, the thing is, the evidence for evolution is no less airtight or obvious if you bother to look at it. It's a little bit more technical, perhaps. But here's what I think is the real difference between flat Earth and young Earth. The amount of time that humanity has known that those things are true or false, right? Humanity has known as a group, for the most part, I mean, there are some exceptions, like the Chinese didn't figure it out until like the 16th century. But for the most part, the educated world has known the Earth as a globe for around, like 3,000 years. We've known the Earth is old for 300 years or so. Maybe 400, depends on exactly how old counts as old and whatnot. But, like, it's been centuries as opposed to millennia. So there's an order of magnitude difference in how long humanity has known this. So Christians at this point, well, the few Christians who do still believe in a flat Earth are rightfully ridiculed by virtually everyone. But because the old Earth, or evolution, are much more recent discoveries, well, there's still a sizable amount of holdover. But here we go.
With the compromised positions of the gap theory and the day-age theory. But it says in Colossians chapter 1, Jesus created all things. This is one of the verses that indicates Jesus is God Almighty in the flesh. There are many other ways to indicate from the Scripture that
it doesn't actually indicate in the flesh. I mean, but it does indicate that the Bible is taking Jesus as God. But yeah, that's one of those things that, like, Docetists might be able to use just as well as quote-unquote Orthodox Christians. And now I realize I'm getting into the weird, nitpicky theology stuff, and I'm going to skip that because that's not what anyone's here for. Sorry about that.
Jesus is God. Not just a God like Jehovah's Witnesses believe. He is God himself. Some of the same names that are given to God are given to Jesus. If you read the book of Revelation, for instance, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. That's an interesting passage, by the way. Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet.
Got that right. Take a drink.
What?
Kent, who knows virtually nothing about Greek, does know what the first and last letters are.
I'm willing to bet those are the only letters he knows.
Yeah, I don't think his college experience involved much fraternity stuff, so that's the only other way I can imagine Bent Hovind knowing what any of the Greek letters are. I would like, actually, for Kent to write out like a third of the letters in the Greek alphabet, majuscule and minuscule, and see what happens. I think it would be an interesting exercise.
I think maybe a more interesting exercise is the letters in the alphabet modern alphabet English users use today that aren't in the Greek alphabet.
That could be interesting. Yeah.
Jesus was saying, I am like the A to Z. I'm like the alphabet. Now tell me, how many times can you write the letter A before you use it up and it's no longer available to be used?
What?
If I write the letter A down 10 billion times...
He's just talking about the non-scarcity of the alphabet because it's an idea. So, like, ideas can be infinitely reproduced. Like, if I say... so here's an example, right? Let's say someone has long hair, and their hair is getting in their way. And for some reason, this person lives in a world where the ponytail has just never been invented, right? And then they put their hair up in a ponytail, and it gets out of their face. And then other people with long hair notice this, and they start doing it too. How many people have to put their hair in a ponytail before the first person can't anymore? Well, there is no number. Literally everyone could do it without taking away the ability of the first person who invented the ponytail to use a ponytail to keep hair out of their face. Similarly, once you know what A is and what it represents in the alphabet and how to use it, no amount of you using it is going to take any amount of use away from other people. But the problem is that that's not what the analogy is here. The alpha to omega is followed up with I am the beginning and the end. It is saying that Jesus is essentially present and eternal and is, a complete eternal being. There's nothing missing. He exists from before the universe and exists outside and beyond it.
I think it goes a little further where it's not just I am the beginning and the end, but he's everything in between as well.
Yeah, sure. But like it's just a weird place to take the analogy. You're just taking the alphabet analogy too far, but we'll see how it goes.
Does that diminish the letter A at all? It does nothing to it, does it? Bible says in the book of Philippians that God will supply our needs according to His riches and glory. It doesn't say He will supply our needs out of His riches and glory. It's according to His riches and glory. There's a vast difference.
I am unconvinced that that vast difference that you're seeing there, Kent, is not just linguistic change from the time of 1611 until the time of when this was given, which was apparently in the 90s, because in one of these he talks about the year 2000 as an upcoming event.
See, if a billionaire gives you $1, he is $1 poorer, right? But if God gives you $1, He is not $1 poorer. He does not give you out of His riches. He gives you according to His riches.
I don't know, because whenever I've seen a church give people money, which is the closest thing we could really reasonably say that we see to God giving people money, that money comes out of their existing budget, which is not infinite. So it seems from a practical, on-the-ground standpoint that God does not have an infinite amount of money.
Not only that, but even from how money functions, even if God can quote-unquote print an infinite amount of money, that doesn't mean that the value of the money doesn't change.
That's true, yeah. If God just decided to hyperinflate, that might be a bad thing. So I guess thanks for not giving everyone infinity dollars, God. Because that would suck.
And Jesus is saying, I'm like the alphabet. I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Use me all you want. You will never even diminish me at all. You're not using up
Jesus?
God's mercy or God's grace. You're
Oh.
using according to. And His forgiveness and His mercy and His grace and His provision is according to His riches and glory, not out of His riches and glory. Some of the newer translations of the Bible have really scrambled that verse, and they say out of His riches. Oh, major mistake. It's according to His riches. But there are all sorts of ways, and you can get off on a long tangent on the subject of how Jesus is God in the flesh. He's not just a God. He was God Himself. But in Colossians, it says, Jesus created all things.
And somebody says, if God made $1, it's counterfeit. Here's the thing. The government just makes them up. They're all counterfeit. They don't mean anything.
Well, since Jesus created all things, and Jesus also said in Matthew chapter 19, have you not read? Now, he's talking about marriage and divorce in this passage, but this is a neat thought he threw in here. Have you not read that He which made them at the beginning made them male and female? This is a verse you should know. We'll put this on a quiz for what are one of the verses that indicates when the beginning was.
See, actually, I gotta be honest. I think the most natural way to read that is at the beginning of humanity, and I don't really care about the interpretation all that much, but I don't think... Because let's say today, if you were to say something that's roughly equivalent to in the beginning, you might say something, at the start of things, right? And then it would usually be in the context of whatever you're talking about. So if I said, at the start of things, humans were restricted to, very primitive stone tools. This doesn't mean at the start of the universe. It means at the start of when we have identifiably human animals. Or if I say, at the beginning, the United States was more federal and less national in terms of the, design of its government as opposed to how its government functions today. I'm not talking about the beginning of time. I'm talking about the beginning of the United States as a government, as well as a single entity for which there is an identifiable government. So I actually think it is kind of stupid to say that any time you see the phrase in the beginning, it requires it to be the beginning of everything. But hey, what do I know? I'm just someone who uses language as like a non-crazy person.
Yeah, it's like words mean things in the context in which they're used.
Yeah. And now it's sort of weird. I'll be honest, it's sort of like a severely autistic reading where like you have to take everything hyper literally. It's like, I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but that's not how people typically use language. That's one of the reasons why people with autism have trouble communicating, because they're bad at context cues. And my guess is that most Bible writers didn't have that problem, because most people don't have that problem.
It's often taken for granted how much ideas are conveyed by analogy.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of anyone, but like that's literally what's going on here. Is Bent Hovind is divorcing all the context and all the normal ways that people speak, because if he does that, if he takes this text in this really weird way that it was almost certainly not intended, then he gets to use it as an argument. But of course, you have to accept the Bible before this argument's going to work, even if it's a bad argument in terms of the Bible. So certainly not going to be convincing to anyone outside of his little group.
which is actually kind of funny because Bent Hovind is not only bad at divorcing, context from language, but he's also bad at divorcing people he wants out of his life.
Oh yeah, he still, as far as I know, hasn't divorced his second wife. So, but he declared the marriage annulled. So that's meaningful.
Yeah, I declare bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah, I didn't say it. I declared it.
Well, here it tells us the beginning was when God created them male and female. Another verse would be Mark 10:6. That's a parallel passage, but basically saying the same thing. In the seminar notebook, you should find a section of verses dealing with when the beginning was. I forgot to mark what page that's on here before the class tonight. But there's a whole section of verses. Here we go, page 13 and 14. At the bottom of page 13, at least in this current edition, we reprint our notebook frequently. You're watching the tape, may have something else, because we reprint all the time. But at the end of the Age of the Earth section, I just listed a bunch of verses about, when was the beginning? And if you go through these verses, and you can do this on your own time, it's interesting to look at how many verses give us clues. For instance, it talks about all the blood of this generation, all the blood, righteous blood shall be required of this generation. And then it says, from the blood of righteous Abel unto Zacharias the prophet. Wait a minute, was Abel the first one to die? According to the Bible, he was. And you can go through the scripture and find quite a few verses that indicate the beginning was indeed about 6,000 years ago. Not millions of years ago. Read the verses very...
The thing is, to get to this, you have to assume that there's actually this coherency between the various books in the Bible. The thing is, modern people like to think about the Bible as a single work. It's not. It's a collection of, depending on which canon you're using, 66 or more works. I don't know of any. Anthology. Right. Now, there's a thematic relation between them, but they're all written in different times and different places by different authors, not always meaning to strongly reference other sections. Like, if you're reading like the Minor Prophets, there's not really that strong an intent to be super consistent with, say, like Genesis. And even when you're looking at some of the oldest parts of the Bible, like Genesis, it's not a single work even in itself. It's an edited together compilation of previous works that have been sort of jammed into each other to form a mostly coherent narrative. But it's clearly not completely coherent. It has problems internally. So it's not even clear that you can say that the Bible has a stance on the age of the earth, or that it was a topic that anyone writing the Bible cared about.
It's at the risk of oversimplifying, it's kind of like reading a whole bunch of short stories about people living around the same time over time, but their lives aren't necessarily connected. So you get kind of a picture of how people were living at the time, and then this person shows up, and all these sorts of things change, and then, that's an oversimplification, obviously, but you see that in a lot of, you'll see you see it a little bit more in sci-fi, where you'll have this world building exercise where you'll see you'll see someone who's living in the slums or living in the castle, and their lives are not connected at all, but you get a picture of the kind of world that you're living in.
Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Very carefully, and you'll say, wow, that does tell us when the beginning was. For instance, Jesus said, from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Now, according to the evolution theory, the beginning was 20 billion years ago when we had a Big Bang. And then 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down. And then it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup, and the soup came alive about 3 billion years ago.
All right, well, for that ridiculous summary, I'm going to drink.
Ugh.
It's also not 20 billion years, but Kent likes to just go with whatever the first answer he was ever given by anyone claiming to be scientifically literate. So, was the creation of male and female the beginning, according to the evolution theory? It was for the kinds of organisms that humans tend to care about, but okay.
No. So those Christians who try to compromise their Bible with the evolution theory are going against this verse. They have to then come up with an excuse, and they'll say, well, this is the beginning of people. Well, that's not what it says, is it? It just says from the beginning of the creation. God made them male and female. And we know from Romans chapter 5 and verse 12 that death came by sin.
Now,
I think
I think we could at least give Kent a little bit of credit here in conflating the beginning of humanity and the beginning of the world, because in his eyes, they were days apart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is also the case, that even according to the Genesis 1 narrative, the creation of male and female was not the beginning of the creation, because that happened, male and female creatures weren't made until day 3, I think. And if you're talking about humans, which they are, that wasn't until day 6. So, no, the Bible is just contradicting itself here, unless we're willing to say that the beginning of the creation doesn't actually mean the beginning of the creation literally. But hey,
I guess you could argue that the 6 days were the creation, and if you fall within that 6-day timeline, you haven't left the creation yet. The creation happened in the beginning.
But remember, his whole thing was he was harping on the phrase "in the beginning of the creation."
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So if we want to take this literally, like Bent Hovind says we're supposed to, Genesis 1 contradicts all these later verses. Or maybe we could have a more nuanced view of how language is used. But you know what? I'm going to skip ahead 30 seconds because I'm kind of tired of Bible interpretation.
is death a friend or an enemy?
It's a frenemy.
The Bible says the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. According to the plain reading of Scripture, if you read Genesis carefully...
Drink for that?
Read all...
No, because he's quoting.
Although, if you turn an enemy into a friend, are you eliminating them as an enemy? Does that count?
Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to hit skip ahead again, because I'm tired of interpreting the Bible. I don't honestly care that much how Bent Hovind interprets the Bible. If he wants to interpret it in a way that's incompatible with physical reality, then he can just be wrong.
It's true.
As in Adam all die, even so in Christ. And people have done this for centuries. You read through the Bible and they add up to dates, which we're about to show you here right now. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 15, Adam was the first man. And you get to King David.
Oh, King David. That's a new topic.
David had 17 wives and a whole bunch of kids. Who knows how many kids he had? Doesn't matter. He had a lot of them. One of those kids was the father of the line of the genealogy that ended up with Mary. And I forget which, I think it's Matthew that covers this genealogy from David's son, and I don't have it in front of me, it's either Nathan or one of the other ones, but it covers the genealogy to Mary. And it ends up in Matthew passage in the genealogy saying, so-and-so was the father of Joseph, which was the husband of Mary.
Okay, I've heard Kent go through this before. All he's doing is saying, hey, the differences in the genealogies of Jesus are whether or not you're tracing your tree back to Mary or Joseph, because apparently they both are descendants of David. I don't care.
Sure. Both his mother and his stepfather were royalty. Now the fact is, Israel didn't have their own king at the time because they'd been controlled by the Romans.
I'm sorry. Who do you think King Herod was, and what was he the king of? Kent. You know King Herod's a character in the Bible. You ever read the Bible, Kent? King Herod was the king of the Roman province of Judea, or the Roman diocese, as it was called in Latin, of Judea. They absolutely had their own king. He wasn't of the line of David, so you can argue about whether or not it fit the biblical criteria, but they definitely had a king. One of the entire reasons, according to the Bible, that Jesus was hauled in front of the Roman authorities was because he was claiming to be the king of the Jews, but they already had one.
But if they had had their own kingdom, Jesus would have been the rightful king through both his stepfather and his mother. So there are no contradictions in the genealogies there. Don't let anybody tell you that. But here we have the Bible telling us very clearly Adam was the first man. Now if you read through Genesis chapter 5, it goes through the genealogies. It says, Adam lived 130 years and begat a son. And we'll go later in the seminar explaining why they lived to be so old. But Adam lived 130 years and begat a son and called his name Seth. So, if you get a graph paper like I've done on my
Opie said this stream is sponsored by the like button. That's true. I'm seeing 46 people viewing, only 13 likes, guys. Means most of you are slacking off. 33 of you about. So, although one of them might be Josh here.
What do you mean, might?
chart right here. You come over 130 years, and you mark off a line, and this is when Seth was born.
Stupid Horror Energy says, why did Jesus need to be from a Davidic lineage? He's gone. He could have just appeared. So the big motivation for Jesus to be connected with the line of David comes from various messianic prophecies in the Bible. If he could not be reasonably said, at least by the gospel writers, to be in the line of David, he wouldn't really fulfill as many prophecies. Now, it's up to you to decide whether or not you think that these prophecies were sort of fulfilled by just saying they were and writing it down, or not. A lot of these things that are in the Gospels just to make a connection to some prophecy end up coming from common source material that's shared at least between the Synoptic Gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So, I mean, there's reason to suspect that in many cases it was just like, oh, we'll just make up a genealogy, or we'll just say that he was born here because it says this in this prophetic book. But yeah, otherwise it would have violated the prophecy. Because one of the things you got to remember is that it wasn't really the case that from the beginning the idea behind messianic prophecies in Judaism was that there would be an incarnation of God. Most Jews at the time and today see messianic prophecies as someone who's going to be a sort of socio-political and religious leader, but who's still going to be just a mortal human who is chosen by God, more like King David than a himself divine incarnation of a person of a triune God. Those ideas are not very present in modern Judaism, nor were they really present in pre-rabbinic Judaism in the first century. So it's sort of an attempt to amalgamate that higher divine Christology with the general ideas of a Messiah that had predated that the life of Jesus of Nazareth in Judea and what was then Judaism, which is not exactly the same as modern Judaism, but you know.
Then it says Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. Then it says Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. In your seminar notebook, the very last page folds out to be this chart. We just got the color ones in, but you got a black and white one in your notebook there. The last page will fold out to be this chart showing the genealogies, and you can trace through Genesis chapter 5. On that seminar notebook, on that chart in the seminar notebook, there are all sorts of interesting points to ponder. You really should take some time to read through the passages that are referred to here. Quite a few different passages are referred to of where you find the dates.
All right, Kent, great. If you trace it back, it comes out to a certain number. But here's the thing. We have no good reason to think that anyone was meant to take these numbers literally, and we have good reasons to think that they weren't, because common practice in the area where these genealogies were being written was to exaggerate the age of the kings. Oh, here we go. Take a drink for Mothra. So the thing is, this is another one of those context-dependent things, right? So Genesis was written during the Babylonian exile, or at least it was compiled during that time and it was edited during that time. It's possible that some parts of it are actually predate the Babylonian exile, but we don't have any good evidence for that. And so this sort of consensus scholarly view is it was compiled by some editor who was probably one of the sort of like religious priestly castes of the Hebrews who were in exile. And he was trying to sort of craft together from pre-existing sacred texts a coherent narrative about the history of the Jewish people up until essentially they established themselves in Canaan, from which they were then ousted by the Babylonians. And at that time, in Babylon, in Mesopotamia, the long-standing tradition was to give people exaggerated ages. And so if you want to take this seriously, then we should also probably take the similar practice in other parts of Mesopotamia, in other cultures in Mesopotamia, of giving great ages to genealogies take that seriously. In which case we have to say that things like the Babylonian king list means that the universe is tens of thousands of years old, because if you add up the reigns of the kings, it goes much farther back than this biblical genealogy. So what are we going to do? There's no... Oh, Mothra's back again. So there's no particularly good reason to take this seriously, but not to take seriously similar literature about the same topic from the same cultural milieu in the same... My goodness. Mothra. Yeah, from the same cultural milieu in the same part of the world about the same topic, just as seriously. There's literally nothing to distinguish this from the Babylonian Kings list, except that Bent Hovind likes Genesis, and he's probably never heard of the Babylonian Kings lists.
Now, I know that history is replete with examples of what are now pretty standardized units of measurement being inconsistent across regions. Mm-hmm. Was that the case for units of time back then?
So yes and no. Not inconsistent enough that, you know, an age of 900 years could be reconciled with a reasonable age. However, in a lot of places in the sort of the Fertile Crescent tended to have years that were about 360 days long, because that is closer to 12 lunar cycles, which is close to how long it takes for the actual sidereal year to complete. But yeah, the problem there is that since you're in an area that's not terribly seasonal, this extra 5 days of difference between, you know, one solstice to the next or whatever doesn't seem terribly significant. So it wasn't until people needed to start really carefully tracking, just based on calendar days, when things were going to occur, that we bumped it up to a 365-day year and sort of just kind of jury-rigged a 12-month system onto it. And then from there, it took more than a millennium to figure out that there was actually a quarter-day discrepancy, and then fix that. And then it took several hundred more years to figure out that, well, it was actually slightly less than a quarter. And we come to our current rule of leap years, where most years ending in 00 aren't leap years, even though they would be if you were to actually do leap years every 4 years. And of course, the year 2000 was an exception because it's divisible by 400, which is the exception of the rule, because it's only just under.
Yeah, if I remember right, it's every 4 years you do a leap year. Every 100 years you don't do a leap year, but every 400 you do a leap year.
Right. Yeah. So 2000 was a leap year, 1600 was a leap year, but 17, 18, 1900 weren't leap years, 2100 won't be. My goodness, Mothra. Alright, well, now that we've talked a lot about time,
to tell the age of the earth, because some of the places in the Bible it gets a little confusing to follow, and then all of a sudden you find a New Testament verse that refers back and helps you clear up all the details. It'll say, for instance, that Israel was ruled by judges for 350 years. Oh, well, then that settles all the differences of the genealogies, you know. Sometimes when you get into the kings...
All the differences of the genealogies. I thought there were no contradictions, Kent. Whatever.
Kings.
I think he means ultimately there. I think he means ultimately there aren't, even though it may seem like there are initially.
I mean, it's just a weird stance. Like, just let there be. For instance, in history, we don't normally say that contradictions just completely negate the value of historical works. For instance, we have multiple accounts of the exact route that was taken by Hannibal's army through the Alps to get to Rome. But the fact that we have contradictory accounts doesn't mean Hannibal didn't get to Rome with his army through the Alps.
Or didn't bring elephants.
Right. We know he did. We've actually found archaeological evidence of his army moving through the Alps. So there's no question Hannibal took his army through the Alps. There's no question some of the things that are talked about in the history of the Bible are broadly true, right? Like the Babylonian exile is certainly a real thing. The return to Israel is certainly a real thing. We have archaeological evidence for both of these things. We have textual evidence for both of these things. We have outside attestation of these things. The fact that there might be a contradiction doesn't invalidate that historical record.
Using Hannibal's route even further, it may not even necessarily be a contradiction, because you have scouting parties, you have foraging parties, so the observation of elements of his armor being found off the main route they took having been misinterpreted isn't itself a contradiction. Like, hey, we found Hannibal's army here, this wasn't where the bulk of the army were.
Right. So yeah, Kent is far too obsessed with niggling little details that I don't think actually matter for the accuracy of the biblical text. It's like, oh, did didn't, what is it? Did King David have 4,000 or 40,000 horses? Who cares?
Overlapping reigns. King David is king for, X number of years. King Solomon becomes king. They're both considered king at the same time. So their reigns overlap. And oftentimes there are New Testament passages that straighten out those details. And if you go through these verses that are listed on your chart here, in the seminar notebook longevity chart, you should find enough information there to clear up some of these tough spots. Now, there are a few differences between the genealogies as far as once in a while it will say, so-and-so was the son of David, when actually he's his great-great-great-great-grandson.
Oh, you mean you can't take them literally, Kent? Okay. I'm just going to take a drink for Kent being inconsistent.
Well, there's also, you see it a lot in the European surnames where surname designates you the son of this particular, you're the son of this family tree.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, if we're going to take the Bible literally, but then Kent's like, except when it's inconvenient for me. I'm like, okay, sure, Kent.
That's common in the Hebrew writing to do that, to say, he's the son of David, when actually there's several generations in there. So there's a few places where you may find a generation skipped. In like in Luke, I think it has an extra person in there compared to Matthew.
Wait, so he acknowledges that generations are skipped, which means you can't simply look at the begat line to determine that the age is necessarily capped at 6,000 years if you allow for any number or a non-zero number of generation skipping.
Yeah, now his contradiction there would probably say that, well, most of the lineages in the Bible don't list a specific age at which someone was begotten, which is true, and the ones in Genesis generally do. So he might argue that, but then again, I don't particularly care if the Bible says this many years, because we know those numbers of years are made up. And also, there was no creation week, and the Earth is 6 billion, or not 6 billion, sorry, 4.5 billion, and I'm rounding to the nearest half billion. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go down to tens of millions of years, but yeah.
So the Bible warned us to be careful about endless genealogies which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in Christ, So I think you may find a few passages that'll confuse you. I went through this 4 or 5 different times as a young Christian, adding up the dates, reading through my Bible avidly, trying to find out how old is the earth exactly.
Did Kent basically say that the Bible warns us to not believe anything that contradicts the Bible? The Bible tells us that the Bible is true according to the Bible?
But also that the Bible is confusing and misleading according to the Bible, at least in certain areas.
But don't be confused or don't be
don't be confused or misled by genealogies. And here's Kent telling you to be confused and misled by genealogies. Yeah, that's exactly. You know what? I'll take a drink for that, because that's crazy. Pick a lane, Kent. Are the genealogies a good thing to get your theology from, or not?
I don't think you're going to get it exactly. For instance, it says Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. Does that mean that's when Canaan was conceived, or that's when Canaan was born? There would be a 9-month difference there, right? And was it exactly on Enos's 90th birthday, or is there a leeway in there of a year? So some of these guys try to get it exactly down to the day, when the creation was. I don't think you're ever going to do that. There's just obvious problems with doing that. But the dates come out, excuse me, to approximately 4000 BC, which would be 6,000 years ago. A lot of people get confused by this because we measure our time from Jesus Christ, from his birth. So it's been 2,000 years since the birth of Christ, and there were 4,000 years before that. So 4 plus 2.
Why is that confusing?
I don't get it.
Okay, sure, whatever.
Equals 6,000 years total of human history. And many people teach and believe, and they may be right, that God is working on a 6,000-year calendar, where we're going to go 6,000 years of human history and then a 1,000-year reign of Christ, which means the Lord should come back anytime. Now, we know our calendar is all mixed up, because Jesus was not born in the year 0. There actually was no year 0. They didn't have a 0 in their mathematics back then.
That's correct.
They went from
Oh, yeah, that is true. Yeah, hey, take a drink. Congrats, Ken. You got a thing right. There was no year 0, which it's still a common thing that I hear people say, and they'll get the math wrong when going from BC to AD and stuff, or BCE to CE. I don't know, whichever one you want. I don't care. I think I use CE in my videos coming out Thursday. Yeah, pretty sure I did.
The distinction seems to be largely irrelevant.
It's how much do you want to reference the life of Jesus when giving a date? And my answer is I don't care how much I or anyone else does.
Yeah.
-1 to +1. Makes it kind of confusing for bookkeeping, but that's what they did. Actually, most scholars think Jesus was born either in 2 or 4 or 6 BC.
But 5 is right out.
How can he be born 4 years before Christ? He is Christ. Well, it's just because our calendar is screwed up, so we don't know the date. We also don't know that...
I thought it was pretty well established that it's understood that he was at least born in the summer. Like,
that doesn't help you know what year.
Oh, I thought he... Yeah, I don't... Yeah, well, I mean, there's also the switch from the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah, the whole... Look, the date of Christmas has no real correlation to the actual time of birth of Jesus. It's actually correlated to the Feast of the Annunciation, which was the celebration of when God, or well, the angel comes to Mary and tells her that she's going to become pregnant, because ancient Christianity saw the conception of Jesus as more important than the birth per se, because it believed the incarnation started around that time. And so it then had this idea that there was a sort of a Judeo-Christian idea around the time that prophets were always born exactly 9 months after they were conceived. So, if you were conceived, January 3rd, 9 months later, on the 3rd day of the month, you were going to be born. And so December 25th is 9 months after the Feast of the Annunciation. So that's why it was picked. And then it accrued various sort of winter solstice celebrations in Western Europe because it was close to, although not exactly on, the winter solstice.
Yeah, because you got the Saturnalia festival, and you had people. There's that kind of civic compromise, like, hey, we're gonna reconcile these two things, because we still like getting together as a community and celebrating things, and then they interconnect themselves into each other.
Yeah, plus, Yule logs and mulled cider and trees are fun. So
yeah, and
there's also very little that would contradict Christian theology about hanging out by a fireplace. So who cares? Is basically what the church said. All right, here we go.
We should go with 365 and a quarter days, or 360 days in the Hebrew calendar. There's a little leeway there. And people...
Okay, the modern Hebrew calendar at least has leap months every once in a while, Kent. So, not strictly true to say it has a 360-day calendar. It kind of does.
I thought I could be wrong here. I thought it was the original Hebrew calendar was based on syndodic months, which were 29 to 30 days, of which there may not even been 12. I can't remember, but I don't. Yeah, that just seems wrong.
It's kind of right. It's like saying the modern calendar has 365 days. It does, but that's not the whole story.
Yeah, because it's not like the original calendar was 10 months until the Caesars came along.
Yeah, thanks. That's why, September isn't the 7th month.
And December isn't the 10th, yeah.
Right, yeah. It's like, thanks, Julius and Augustus.
Do you think the Lord's coming back in the year 2000? Well, I hope so, but God might not be using our calendar.
I can tell you from the future, Kent, the answer is no.
He may have his own.
I don't know if you remember the Conan O'Brien bit in the year 2000, where they would speculate on absurd things that would occur as of the year 2000.
Yeah. Maybe Jesus will come back in the year 2000, 20 years ago, guys. Oh, now it's almost going to be 21. Man, I feel old.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't sell my clothes and go stand on a mountain someplace. We don't know when the Lord's coming back. Okay, I would just keep serving the Lord till He comes. But the dates from the Bible, if you just simply add them up...
That was a joke that no one laughed at.
I didn't even notice.
See, the way you can tell is that Bent Hovind likes to laugh at his own jokes, but no one else does.
And there's a few tough spots, I understand, but you're going to get approximately 6,000 years ago, not millions of years ago. And I think it'd be wise for you to read through those verses there on the longevity chart at the bottom and look them up yourself and say, okay, this does piece together some of the details. Other passages tie things in, especially in the New Testament. For instance, in the book of Jude, it says Enoch is it the seventh from Adam? I think is how the verse goes in the book of Jude. It says Noah, the eighth person. Oh, well, that closes the gaps right there, doesn't it?
Does it?
If Noah is the eighth person, well, at least you know there's no gaps between Adam and Noah.
Oh, okay. I guess.
So there are passages, and it'd be wise to read those carefully and say, wow, hey, wait a minute, that does eliminate any speculation.
But of course, the thing is that Jude was almost certainly written while referencing Genesis, so it's not... I guess if you're starting with the idea that, oh, it's all inspired, then yeah, sure. But I'm going to skip ahead again, because I'm tired of talking about the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, you eliminate speculation, but you're uncritically accepting everything, so how is that an improvement?
Yeah, because the thing is, I am willing to say, like, I don't really care if the Bible really is teaching that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I'm not here to defend the Bible. I am, however, willing to say that Bent Hovind intentionally takes it in, like, the stupidest way possible. Well, no, not quite the stupidest way possible, because he could be a flat earther. But he takes it in one of the stupidest ways possible.
I don't think he could call it a flat... He has the Hovind theory with the ice shell, so I don't think he's a...
Yeah, but it's supposed to be a spherical canopy, not a dome.
That's what I mean, though. So I don't think he's a flat earther. Right?
No, he's not. He's... Although hearing him argue against the flat earth is kind of funny, because he doesn't actually have any arguments. He just says, come on, that's so stupid. It's like, that's not really an argument, Kent, but okay. I mean, I don't disagree. You're right, it is so stupid, but why? Do you have a reason behind that? And the answer is no. He can't actually defend the globe Earth against flat Earth ideas. Ironically,
the same fallacious tactics he used to dismiss evolution, he also uses to dismiss the flat Earth.
Right, yeah. He happens to be correct about the shape of the Earth, but not for good reasons.
Yeah.
All for 40 years, and then King David 40 years, and then King Solomon for 40 years. And after that, they got a whole bunch of kings. They split up into two kingdoms, and it gets kind of confusing to follow. And finally, they both get taken captive. One bunch goes in 721 BC to the Syrians, I believe, and the other bunch goes to Nebuchadnezzar about 120 years later, and they get taken captive. And they finally get back in the land, and then they're under Roman control when Jesus is born on the scene.
Hey, there was a little bit of a gap in there where they were under their own control, and there was another little gap where they were under, Hellenistic control. The Seleucid Empire was a thing, Kent. But I guess no one cares about the Seleucids. Well, except for the writers of Maccabees. The Maccabees. Which, hey, you know what? I recommend the Maccabees. Most people haven't read them. They're part of the so-called Deuterocanon of the Old Testament. They're actually pretty good. Right there.
Okay, long story. Anyway, about 6,000 years ago for the creation is what the Bible teaches. Now, you will find some, like the Schofield Reference Edition, which says this happened in 4004 BC. You're not going to get that close from reading the Bible. But actually, it's interesting. Bishop Ussher in 16 or 1700 did this. Went through the Scriptures, spent a lifetime devoting himself to finding out the exact date of creation. And he analyzed everything he could find that might give a clue. Any eclipses that are mentioned, or things like that. He went through all the information he could find and come up with 4004 BC. Nobody's ever proven him wrong, let me say that, but I would not dogmatically say it was 4004 BC.
Bent Hovind is way too fond of the phrase, no one has ever proven this wrong, as if it means anything. Look,
yeah,
I own a small black dragon who, lives in my refrigerator and helps me pickle cucumbers. No one's ever proven me wrong, guys!
Lucky? Can I see him?
No.
Oh.
But if you
can I at least have some pickles?
No, but you still can't prove me wrong.
It's like
his name's
common
his name's Bob
argument, which I don't really like, but it's not entirely without merit. Is the whole the teapot in the asteroid belt thing?
Yeah,
you can't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Russell's teapot. I say that there's a perfectly preserved China teapot floating through the asteroid belt. Prove me wrong. the fact that you can't prove me wrong doesn't mean you should believe the claim. It doesn't mean that there's anything to the claim. You can make up literally anything that can't be proven wrong and then say you can't prove me wrong. But I will also point out that the idea of 4004 BC has been proven wrong by science. Although I guess no one has proven it wrong using just the Bible.
This is actually it's a common tactic among creationists where things that are unknown. Now this isn't the case here, but like, okay, we don't know if this actually has occurred, so we're allowed to default because it's unknown. Any claim is equally valid. So, like, well, that's not even necessarily true because some things at least have some merit.
Yeah.
They just haven't been proven, or some things are literally impossible, or unexaminable and or unfalsifiable.
Okay, but I think right now we are going to go on a quick intermission, refresh drinks, enjoy my wonderful commercial, because that's all it really is, and let's turn off the intro so the intro doesn't replay when we come back, which I always forget to do, but not this time. Alright, well, I will be back in just a few minutes, and please enjoy the sappy music, the slideshow, and Godzilla. We're still on the slideshow. Is it sriracha popcorn? Yeah. It's all the hydrogenated oil. Yeah, basically. Oh. Oh. Nani? Dare? Oh. Gojira desu ka? Hi, Gojira-san. Hi. Well, there was a little bit of hot mic, but whatever. I didn't say anything too embarrassing. Yeah, don't forget to check your mute this time. Yeah. Well, hey, you know what, guys? If it didn't have at least one production problem, it really wouldn't be Kent with Bent. So, you know, it happens.
It's actually just proof that it's just not a pre-rendered robot. There's actually some, you know.
Yeah, no, this is actually live. And also, I think Gargoyle said that they had bought a shirt, and if you did buy a shirt from the store, I thank you very much. And from what I understand from other people who have bought the Teespring merch from my channel, that it is quite nice. I know some people have bought the fleece blanket. A few people have bought the shirts. At least one person has bought the pillow. And apparently they're all very nice. And by By the way, the fleece blanket and the wall hanging and the pillow are all like the highest definition pictures of my avatar that have ever been made. They're like 16K images or some craziness like that. Just because, what is it? Teespring kept saying, "Oh, your image is too small." So eventually, I was just like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just gonna bump it up to like 16,000 pixels in the y-axis. I don't even care. Let's just do it. And it took like 7 hours to render. But they finally accepted it. Anyway, let's get back to some Bent Hovind.
Atheists ask me all the time, since I do lots of debates at universities, they'll say, who did Adam's sons marry? You're going to get asked this question sooner or later. Last night, I was preaching in Alabama, and 2 kids stayed afterwards. Becky, you were there. 2 of these kids were strong believers in evolution, and they argued with me for well over an hour after the seminar. And one of the questions is, who did Adam's sons marry?
I don't care. I'm skipping. Yeah. Get to something worth responding to, Kent.
Evolution is true. We talked after an hour. I looked at him and I said, you know, I bet I know why you gave up on the Bible. It's not because you have any evidence for evolution, obviously, because I've been asking you for it for the last hour.
And ignoring every time you gave it.
I don't know you at all, but I bet you gave it up because there's something in here that goes against your lifestyle.
Oh, okay, so this is one of the ones we don't always talk about because it doesn't always come up. But it's one of the sort of secret drink rules, and it's drink whenever Bent Hovind says, you only believe in evolution because you're horny. So we're going to take a quick drink for that one.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's one of the most ridiculous arguments I've ever heard for anything. It's just...
I don't know if it's pornography or... He said, why would you say that? First thing he said...
Stop slut-shaming.
Lucky guess. Just hit it right on the head.
No, why would you say that is not... First of all, that was a joke that no one laughed at, so I'm going to take another drink. The answer to why would you say that is because it's such a ridiculous implication. Right? Like, first of all, think of all the Christians who live lifestyles that are incompatible with what Bent Hovind would find acceptable.
Or Bent Hovind himself?
Yeah, there you go. But then there's also plenty of people who do accept evolution, who are either Christians or who live lifestyles that are not incompatible with Christianity. Like, there are plenty of atheists who accept evolution, who live monogamously with their wife and have never cheated on her and don't engage in, like, I don't know, threesomes or whatever. And not that it's any of my business. You do what you want as long as everyone in the relationship agrees. But, yeah, like, there isn't this, like, oh, evolutionists are all libertine degenerates and creationists are all paragons of virtue. It's just not the case. And, like, yeah, Now, I'm trying to think, did anything about my lifestyle actually change as a result of just deciding young Earth creationism wasn't true? I mean, it didn't even result in me leaving Christianity, at least, I mean, no, it didn't. So...
I will say that, at the very least for me, I remember one instance in college, I met this woman for coffee, and I thought we were just meeting for coffee, and then she brought up, like, young Earth creationist stuff, and I was like, well, let's not... And then we never saw each other again. So in an indirect way, it does apparently limit, young Earth creationists do seem to have issues with being with non-young Earth creationists.
And then Manny Karen says, dating methods are crap, but I'm gay. Well, apparently, according to Bent Hovind, that's the only reason that you would ever reject young Earth creationism, apparently. My goodness. Even though I know of some people who, I can't say for certain that they're gay, but, like, probably. And they're young Earth creationists. And it's like, is that why you believe in young Earth creationism? Because you think it's going to help you resist what you see as deviant urges? Maybe it is, actually. Maybe that does help. I don't know.
Maybe in an indirect fashion where they feel like if they just adhere to the purest form of what they think Christianity should be, that lets them hold on to what they think, how they think they should act.
Man, that's so unhealthy.
It is it's unhealthy and for a number of reasons. But
Oof, man.
Yeah.
That's a setup for a miserable lifetime.
Yeah, my philosophy is you do you, and as long as it's consensual, I don't really care what you do with other people behind closed doors.
All right, here we go.
Oh, wait, did he make a joke?
That's why people don't like that.
Well, I drank
it
for it.
chaps their hide.
Yeah, I did too.
Well, get some Vaseline, man. You're going to need it because we're going to be judged according to that book, whether you like it or not. Who did
You're
the
gonna be judged
anyway?
according
The
to the
Bible
Bible,
says in
man.
Genesis 4, Cain, after he slew Abel, Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. Well, that'll preach right there. The Bible says Jonah went down to Tarshish.
That's what she said.
Anytime you get away from the Lord, it's down. Then he went down into the ship. Then he went down into the sea. Then he went down into the whale's belly. He kept going down, down, down until he hit rock bottom. And finally, the whale said, I can't stand this preacher. I'm going to get rid of him. And puked him up on, he went to a whale seminary and came out. He learned a little thing down there, learned something down there. But it says, Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden, and Cain knew his wife. Now, the word knew is an old King James word for they had sexual intercourse, and his wife conceived, it says.
Is that true?
Now, it does not say he found her.
Yeah, when the Bible says that someone knew someone, there's usually at least the strong implication that they had intercourse. Now, not always the pregnancy. No. Well, I mean, it is a joke now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people now say, I knew someone in the biblical sense. It means they slept together. Because that's literally the biblical sense of the term.
Yeah, I didn't know it was the literal version too. I knew it was a joke. I was like, oh, huh.
Yeah, no, that's actually in the Bible. Yep, it was a euphemism.
There, it says he knew her there. Some people say, see, he went to Nod and found his wife.
I don't care about this. I'm skipping it.
Check the Bible.
Like, if the reason you're rejecting the Bible is because the story of Cain is a little bit confusing, then, like, okay, that's fine. I don't care. And but if that's the thing that's, like, your big hang-up is Cain and his wife, like, it's such a weird thing to have a hang-up on compared to other things, like, I just don't see why it's a big deal.
And keep that thought in mind.
Oh, sorry. What's up?
So, those familiar with, I just thought of this really, like, if you wanted to troll...
Drink for Godzilla.
If you wanted to troll younger creationists, so the old Command and Conquer series, the antagonist is Cain with a K, who leads the cult of Nod. You could use that as an example as to why the Bible is wrong.
I mean, maybe, although it's pretty clear that they based the Command and Conquer aspects on the Bible.
Oh, no, I agree. Like, if you just wanted to troll, like, some younger creationist just to, like, who hasn't even, like, considered this at all.
Right.
Because it's just an amusing, connection. But, sorry, I was... Go on.
I mention that to him in debates all the time. Now, are you asking this question because you would really like an answer? Or because you're determined to reject God's word?
I don't care.
And I say, then your way of not doing it, that's for sure. And I don't like everything I do either. I mean, I am a little confrontational in my debates and in my seminars. And I tell folks, man, if you don't like something in my seminar, edit it out.
There wouldn't be anything left, Kent.
Copyright it. I don't know why all Christians don't do that, but they're not. And some people say, I probably every one of my jokes that I tell has been criticized.
Rightfully so.
You know what? That's true. I'm going to take a drink. That's accurate, Kent. Every single one of your jokes has probably been criticized.
I find I have a standard letter I send out. Thank you so much for your letter. I understand you don't like, and I fill in the blank, whatever joke it was. I say, I certainly will try to be sensitive to the Lord, and I'll delete anything in my seminar that God tells me to delete. In the meantime, until he tells me, feel free to edit it out and send the tapes to your friends.
So what that means is until I feel like it's bad, but since I made it up, because I guarantee you that anything that God has quote-unquote told Kent Hovind has just been his own confirmation bias being pushed off onto God.
In other words, I'm listening to God as carefully as I know how until he tells me I'm leaving it in, but you can't tell him like that way. But that's the way I do it, okay? I decided I'm going to please God. Or try to. And if nobody else likes it, oh well. He's the one I'm more scared of than anybody. So I'll just stick with trying to please him. So who did they marry?
His own confirmation bias.
Yeah, well, good luck with that.
Anyway, I'd say those folks who say, who did Adam's sons marry? I start off by pointing out that this is a minor problem compared to what they believe. I think a good technique, and then they say all the matter in the universe was squished into this little dot.
No, Ken. All of the energy. Energy. There wasn't any matter. So I'm going to take a drink for Bent Hovind, not even understanding the very basics of the Big Bang.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm skipping a whole bunch of this because I'll be honest, I don't care what Bent Hovind's interpretation of the Bible is. It's like I care a little bit because I have criticisms for some of it because it's really dumb. Just internally, like it doesn't actually match very well with what the Bible seems to actually be trying to say or focusing on. But independent of that, it's just dumb because it contradicts reality. But beyond that, I don't super care. So that's why we're skipping a lot of it.
They don't know where the dot came from, of course, and then it exploded.
Yeah, not knowing where something came from doesn't matter. I've said this before, right? But like, if you see a car on an icy road in the ditch, right? You don't have to know what address that car originated its journey on to be able to tell that it slipped on the ice after losing traction and went into the ditch. But like, those are unrelated points of information. Now, would it be handy to know where it came from? I mean, maybe in terms of like, informing interested parties about the car crash. But you still don't need to know in order to know what happened to the car. So we don't need to know where the singularity, if there was a singularity, which is still a bit of an open question, and apparently now a lot of cosmologists are leaning towards no, but whatever, let's just say there was. Where it came from is irrelevant to whether it existed and what happened to it. So, yeah.
And the textbook says 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down, which is what I have on my chart. And these same two charts are in your seminar notebook, the two timelines. Absolutely one of the most effective things to do to discuss evolution with somebody. I do this on the airplanes every week. I flew 10 flights last week. It was a busy week. But I will take my napkin out when I sit next to somebody on the airplane, and I draw two lines on there, and I make 4 marks on each line. Creation, flood, Jesus, today, the creation timeline, and Big Bang, Earth forming, life starting, and today.
Okay.
Because there's something about visualizing in front of you instead of just verbalizing and talking about it. When you see the visual, it's like, wow, it doesn't make sense, does it?
What? No.
What about that doesn't?
Yeah, I'm taking a drink because both of those make sense on a timeline.
Yeah, those are points on a timeline. That's all it is.
Any timeline with a list of events could make sense. I mean, what? I have no idea what he means.
I feel like he skipped the middle part where he explained why one should make sense and one shouldn't, but to the person on this supposed flight conversation.
I feel like these conversations don't actually happen. I think these are all made up.
I think they're shower thoughts that he has.
Yeah, I think I said that with Bent last time. Is it's like he confuses the you go in the shower and you like play over conversations that are just make believe in your head and like, oh, I would say this and then they would say this and whatever, and then he forgets that was just a thought he had in the shower and he turns it into a memory. Yeah, I honestly think that's a potential thing that happens to Bent Hovind is he has an inability to distinguish shower thoughts from memories.
So instead of just telling them what they believe, show them what they believe.
Okay.
The Bible says in Revelation chapter 1, blessed is he that heareth, or he that readeth, and they that hear. See, you only gain 10 or 15% through what you hear. I get less than that. I got to see it. People give me directions. Go down the street, turn left, go 2 blocks, turn right. I say, stop right there. I'm already lost. Write it down. Draw me a map.
Okay, so Kent's a visual learner. I don't see what the point is. It said, blessed are those who readeth and heareth. It didn't say, blessed are those who heareth, and more so, blessed are those who both readeth and heareth. Like, is this an exclusive? Like, that's just not, again, this is not how language works. I'm taking a drink because Bent Hovind's ability to twist basic English into really weird interpretations is just amazing to me.
Yeah, like that. I read that statement as, blessed are those who learn what is thought to be the gospel.
Right. Yeah.
That's it.
You could, the more basic interpretation, if you were to expand it to be less ambiguous, would be, blessed are those who read and blessed are those who hear. Okay, they both get a blessing, but it doesn't imply that one gets like the double blessing or something. This isn't like, I don't know, like the hadith where supposedly Muhammad said that certain surahs in the Quran were worth reciting the whole rest of the Quran. Like,
plus it's probably like conceptually, like if you've understood these things and taken in, like it's not like, oh, screw you, Helen Keller. Like, I mean,
oh, Helen Keller gets no blessings. Is that what you're saying, Kent? Oh man. Well, yeah, it's also this like blessing measurement system. Like, what are the objective units for blessings, Kent? How do you tell? How do you know that this person was blessed twice as much as that person, or even just more than that person?
I propose the blessing as the unit.
The blessing.
Yeah.
What about the blestrum?
Ooh.
Yeah, the blestrum. It's a good one. Anyway.
You draw me a map, I look at the map, throw it away, I can drive right to it. You can tell me 50... Now, women seem to be better at listening to directions. And they don't understand how men can't do it. So they get mad at the husband and say, you never listen to me. I'm trying, but it just doesn't register. Draw me a map, okay? Make me a list.
Yeah,
they just learn different, if at all. So I put the 4 points on the map. And
wait, did he just say women learn different, if at all? I'm going to drink for that casual sexism right there. Because you know what? Yeah. There are some studies that say that on average, women are a bit better with, language skills and are less likely to be visually oriented learners. There's some truth to it.
Yeah, and there's some truth that like men are better at, like, not significantly, but like measurably at proprioception and like visual spatial learning. But that just means that they learn differently. It doesn't mean that they're one's better at directions than the other. It just depends on how the information is conveyed.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things where like the difference is slight enough that any given individual can fall just about anywhere on that like spectrum.
Oh yeah.
This clarifies it. So when somebody says, who did Cain or Adam and Eve's sons marry? I say, okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. However, I want you to see the problem you have. You're teaching that 20 billion years ago there was a big bang. You don't know what exploded.
Nothing exploded. I'm going to take a drink because it wasn't an explosion.
It wasn't even oxygen. Oxygen didn't even exist at the time.
You don't need oxygen for an explosion. If you rupture a liquid nitrogen tank, you'll get an explosion.
Yeah, I know. It's just... this is Kent Hovind we're talking about here.
Well, yeah.
He's thinking
at least he's not Matt Powell, who thinks that the sun needs oxygen to burn, even though the air in space is different.
What?
Not kidding.
I'm just going to not think about that anymore, because that's going to hurt my chemistry-oriented brain.
Yup.
0.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down, developed a hard rocky crust. This is what the book says. 3.9 billion years ago, the Earth had cooled enough for water vapor to condense, and the Earth was, for the first time, experiencing violent rainstorms. That's what the textbook says. And in the oceans, the first living organisms appeared. Now, you see this in textbooks a lot, and I've got a giant textbook collection in my office. You can go in and see it later if you'd like. They will say, these life forms appeared, or they emerged.
Okay.
That's not a scientific explanation.
Yeah, that's because...
It's not given as one.
Right.
It's just saying there's evidence that at this point in time there were organisms in the ocean. How they came about was not claimed.
I'm going to take a quick drink. And here's why. Let's say we take a different field of study. Let's say we take archaeology, right? And we see the first appearance in the archaeological record of a new technique for pottery, right? That doesn't tell us how the technique was invented. It doesn't tell us who invented it. It doesn't tell us much about the people who invented it. But it's still accurate to say that according to the archaeological record, this new form of pottery appeared. What do you want? We have actual physical evidence that at a certain point in time, organisms had emerged or appeared. If you say that they didn't, you're lying. Even if you couldn't explain it at all, it's still true.
Not only that, but then you have instances of inventions that were independently created in separate civilizations, like the wheel. Like it was independently invented multiple times throughout history. So it emerging they say the wheel emerged in this region at this time, and then it merged somewhere else this time, and they didn't even like things can occur independently of one another as well.
Yeah.
Or inventions, technologies, or information can be shared between civilizations. So it's like
So just saying that the fact that the text says it emerged isn't an explanation. It's not intended as one. It's just a statement of fact. Yeah. But we'll keep going.
That's a religious statement.
Nope, I'm going to take a drink for that too, because that is not what religion means, Kent.
Well, to be like, if him saying it's an explanation would be a potentially religious statement, but that's not what the statement is actually claiming. So his straw man is a religious statement, I guess?
Well, maybe, I don't know.
That's no different than us saying, in the beginning, God, is it?
Yes, because one of those things is actually backed up definitely by physical evidence. The other one, much less so.
Yeah.
They say, these living organisms appeared.
Yeah.
This one's...
That's because they physically appear in the rocks, Kent. I'm taking a drink. I can't with this. It was bad enough when it was just like, oh, hey, look what the Bible says. And I'm like, I don't really care in this context. No, don't get me wrong.
In the 1600s, European colonists appeared on the American continent.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is the case that is a thing that happened. It doesn't explain it, but it also doesn't make it false. Like, physically, their remains appear in the fossil record. And I know Kent's like, there's no such thing as a fossil record, but that's just like saying there's no such thing as, I don't know, plastic. It's just demonstrably false. It's right there. You can go look at it. You can touch it. You can go find some on your own.
Says, swirling in the
fossil vinyl record.
Well, maybe in a few 100,000 years there will be some fossilized vinyl records. I don't know.
Waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Well, I guess it is. Doesn't happen at all.
Demonstrate this, Kent. Just demonstrate it. You've never been able to demonstrate. Now, to be fair, science hasn't yet demonstrated how abiogenesis has occurred, and maybe it won't. Whatever. I don't really have a dog in that fight. You know what?
It's currently unknown.
If it turns out that there's just no plausible physical mechanism for abiogenesis, I'll say, then maybe it was a supernatural entity. Whatever. But we're not at the point where we can make that determination, and we're making progress in terms of ideas behind abiogenesis, but we don't currently have a theory of abiogenesis. And I'm not honestly holding my breath for one, which means I don't really care how it happened that much, because there isn't a right answer yet. Or, well, okay. We don't know what the right answer is, or if there is one. There might not be one.
Much more importantly, the answer to that question is not nearly as interesting or useful to humanity as whether evolution is true or not.
Well, at least in terms of interesting, I think that depends from person to person. But no matter what the answer to abiogenesis is, it doesn't affect how true evolution is.
Very true.
Evolution just needs life to have appeared, right? Whether it be by supernatural means, whether it be by natural means, whether it be by weird tinkering aliens, it doesn't matter. Once it gets here, evolution starts. Until then, we don't have biological evolution. But the exact manner in which life appears doesn't matter for evolution.
Well, to be fair, you need life, and you need life to reproduce with variation. If you had somehow a form of life that literally reproduced perfectly with no variation, evolution...
I wouldn't consider that life. I consider life... So my definition for life is a chemical system which maintains a thermodynamic disequilibrium from its environment and which is capable of undergoing evolution.
Fair enough.
You meet all those criteria, you're alive. You meet only one of them or two of them, then not alive. So like artificial life that's just software based, not really alive because it's not actually maintaining. It's not a chemical system basically.
Well, like AI?
Yeah. Might be conscious at some point. Or like there's been some artificial life programs, like Conway's Game of Life is sort of that. Or there was a series of video games in the 90s called the Creatures games. It went 1, 2, 3, then I think there was Docking Station? But anyway, they used like genetic algorithms and whatnot to create these little software-driven organisms that you could teach and lead around, and they would breed, and there'd be mutations, and they'd swap genetic information in breeding events and whatever, and they'd evolve. But they weren't a chemical system. Now, you could argue that they maintained a thermodynamic disequilibrium in a simulated state from their environment, which they did. But yeah, because they're not a chemical system, I don't count them. So those are my requirements. It has to be a chemical system, has to have thermodynamic disequilibrium with its environment, and has to be able to evolve. And you're alive. So there you go. Yeah, now you guys know what I count as alive. And the reason why I'm sort of iffy on viruses is because I'm not yet convinced that they maintain thermodynamic disequilibrium with the environment. Dr. Dan does argue that they do, but he hasn't presented me with sufficient evidence for me to completely accept.
What about bacteriophages?
What about them?
Are they kind of in the same book realm as viruses for you, or?
I mean, they are viruses.
Yeah, I guess they're just like special kind of viruses. I wasn't sure, but yeah. Sure.
Okay. And many Karen, I hope I'm saying that name right, but many Karen says that viruses are not alive. I mean, look, I've heard decent arguments both ways from a virologist. Now, granted, a virologist might be, biased in favor of saying they are alive, and it is true that life is sort of a bit of a spectrum. But anyway, here we go.
How can they say this kind of stuff and call it science? Has anybody ever seen soup come alive?
I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it.
That's not that has no business being a science book. That's not a scientific statement. That's a religious statement.
That wasn't.
This is a college textbook. I've got it in my office there. It says the first self-replicating systems, in other words, organisms able to reproduce.
It didn't even say organisms. It just said systems. A bunch of RNA that self-catalyzes its own reproduction is not alive, but it's a self-replicating system.
I mean, water disassociates within itself and reassociates within itself.
Yeah. We also have hypercycles that aren't quite alive, but they do manage to replicate themselves. And they have metabolism, which is interesting. So they reproduce and maintain a thermodynamic disequilibrium, but they don't evolve. So we have more than one non-living self-replicating system that we can create in labs in conditions that mimic those that are reasonably thought to be similar to those of the early Earth. So anyway, well, let's see what else Bent Hovind has to say. Now that he's finally got onto something that I really have something to say about.
Must have emerged in this organic soup. One of the first debates, matter of fact, the first debate I ever did, University of West Florida. One of the guys in the audience asked Dr. Pruitt, who's the anthropology professor there, they said, Dr. Pruitt, would you please explain to us how sexual reproduction evolved? I mean, you go from animals that just simply divide, asexual reproduction. How do you get male and female? He stood up and he said, well...
What's that?
I was going to say that not sexual reproduction isn't limited to just male, female. It's a little bit more complicated.
Oh, don't worry. I'm gonna let him finish, and then I'm gonna dive into that.
Yeah.
Going from asexual to sexual reproduction is a giant mother may I step in the process of evolution. So, wait a minute. A mother may I step. You ever play that game, Mother May I? The guy turns around, Mother May I? Yes.
All right, so I haven't seen this debate with Dr. Pruitt. Maybe I'll look it up sometime. I don't know. I don't know if he said that. If he did, it was a stupid answer. But then again, he's an anthropologist. Anthropologists aren't usually answering questions about, early developments in life as a whole. But here's the thing, right? At its basic level, what is sexual reproduction? It's reproduction in which genetic material is exchanged between two organisms, resulting in a new organism that has genetic material from both parents. The thing is that bacteria can do this because they'll extend a little tube, which I believe is called a fistula, which is just Latin for tube, because you can't just call things by normal names. You got to pretend that you speak Latin. But anyway, and then they'll exchange little bits of their plasmid that they'll produce, right? And then they'll split, and the resulting 4 bacteria ultimately are a blend of the original 2 bacteria's plasmids. And the plasmid is the way that a bacterium keeps its DNA. It's a little loop of DNA, right? They keep their DNA in a circle as opposed to a chromosome. Now, once you get diploid eukaryotes, you can do the thing where you divide but only create haploid cells that then can combine with other haploid cells of closely enough related organisms. Now, at first, this is not going to be male or female, right? And this isn't a hard thing to do. Basically, you just don't duplicate your genome after you divide the genome into pairs, which you have to do to replicate the cell no matter what. So, okay. Now, at first, this isn't going to be male and female, because these gametes are just going to be the same size, because that's a simpler system to set up, it's easier to evolve, and there's barely any work that has to be done from a genetic level to do it. And then you just have a little bit of suppression in terms of things like, recognizing other cells as foreign on like cell membranes and stuff like that, and suddenly you've got gametes, and they're isogamous gametes, they're the same size. Now from here you have multiple strategies to help avoid things like self-crossing. Because one of the problems is, if you just release a bunch of isogamous gametes that don't really have any gate checking requirements, you'll end up getting with a lot of self-crossing. Which means you'll just be reshuffling your own genome in those instances, which is suboptimal. You really want to combine your genome with that of a related but not identical organism. So that way you shuffle around those genes. It increases evolvability, which is a long-term benefit for any lineage. Okay, well, there's a couple ways you can do that. One of the big ones is size differentiation. And once you have size differentiation, you have male and female, because male and female are literally defined by gamete size. The male of any given species is the organism that produces the smaller gametes. Or if you have like a hermaphroditic species like many mollusks, like snails, right? The male gametes are the smaller gametes. Now, other organisms like fungi have taken a different route, in which they produce chemically tagged gametes, which can only combine with gametes that have different chemical tags. And so they have multiple mating groups. They're usually given letters. So like you'll have mating group A, B, C, whatever. And the gametes are the same size, but because they have chemical tags that help reduce the instances of self-crossing, it still works out. They have mating types. And sex is just a kind of mating type. It's a mating type defined by gamete size. And there's really not that much to it. I actually have a video about this. I believe it's called Let's Talk About Sex. And although I spelled sex, I think I spelled it like Sigma E Chi, just to avoid, YouTube trying to demonetize everything.
I believe you're mistaken about it being called a fistula. I think it's actually a pilus.
No, it might be that. Whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a pilus. But either way, yeah. So the evolution of sexual reproduction occurs very early on. And it probably actually started with bacteria consuming each other and then incorporating small bits, mostly accidentally at first, of the prey plasmid. But there's also been other ideas like virus-like evolution, and there are multiple reasonably plausible pathways. And it's not necessarily the case that every lineage with sexual reproduction reached it via the same pathway. It has probably evolved independently a few times because it greatly increases the viability of offspring. And so, yeah, this is not a giant Mother May I step, where there are many plausible ways for it to happen. We have organisms that are all steps along the spectrum. We have organisms that just directly swap DNA and then divide. We have organisms with anisogamy gametes that don't really divide into mating types. We have multiple kinds of mating type systems. We have organisms that just use broadcast spawning. We have external fertilization that's more directed. We have internal fertilization. We've got various kinds of pregnancy systems, including some systems where the male becomes more or less pregnant. Like, there's just the entire spectrum that you would predict from evolution is here. And I'm sorry that an anthropologist who focuses on humans, by definition, doesn't know all of this, but there's really no reason to expect him to. But anyway, we're gonna keep going unless you got anything there.
I just want the fungi system that you're describing. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's called heterothalia.
I'm not sure if that is correct. I would have to double check.
Okay.
I'm not a big fungus guy.
I also am not a mycophile, so yeah. I don't know.
Nice.
You may. A Mother May I step. That's not a scientific explanation.
No, it's not. It's a bad answer.
That shows an enormous amount of faith.
No, it shows an enormous amount of ignorance about a subject that isn't in his specialty. You could have also asked him about the aerodynamics of supersonic aircraft. He'd probably be like, I don't know.
That's plain go zoom.
Yeah, it's just not his topic of study.
And I don't care if they want to believe that. I tell them, look, if you want to believe in evolution, that doesn't bother me. You can believe in the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, evolution.
Look, if it didn't bother you, you wouldn't have spent your entire life arguing against it, Kent. Yeah. So I'm just going to take a drink because that's ridiculous. It obviously bothers you. In fact, in your so-called thesis, you complain about it.
It doesn't bother me. But if you want to use my tax dollars to teach all the kids in public school that that's science, oh, now that's going to bother me. Because that's not science. That's your religious belief. But here they say they must have emerged. There's that word again. Now watch for that. You'll see it all through the textbooks. Man emerged in the African continent 3 million years ago.
Yeah?
Just claiming that they emerged, does that mean anything?
Yes, it means that's when we start seeing evidence that they existed at a time in a place. That's literally what that means. It's not an explanation, it's just a statement of a fact of the fossil record.
To use a simpler example, if you wake up with a pimple on your face and you said it emerged on this date, like, you're not giving it a reason why it occurred, or it's like, hey, I have a pimple now.
Yeah.
That's not science. How they don't see it, I don't know. All I can figure out is the God of this world has blinded their minds.
What? Wait, God blinded?
No, the God of this world, I think he means Satan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't emerge.
Yes, they did. Even if they emerged through supernatural means, they occur for the first time in the fossil record at a particular time, in a particular place. That means they emerged at that time and place, Kent. You can back up and try to dispute the fossil record, which I'm sure you will later. But until you do, you can't complain about this phraseology.
So I tell them, look, fellas, you believe 4.6 billion years ago the Earth formed, or 4.6 billion years ago Earth formed, and then it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. Or 3.9 according to some books. Who cares? Okay. Some are saying 4.1 now. They're missing the whole point. So I don't have a date on this one. Because you look at 10 books, you're going to get 10 different numbers.
No.
But the bottom line is they have to believe in spontaneous generation, which was proven wrong 150.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink.
Because that's stupid.
So spontaneous generation was the idea that the vital force of animals could, or presumably plants, I suppose, could seep out into the environment. And the vital force was just this sort of like magical life energy that had to go into something. And so it would organize the matter in, say, decaying matter or a pile of dirty clothes or whatever, into a new organism that could be as complex as a fly or a mouse, right? So this was an idea associated with vitalism, the idea that what differentiates life from non-life is a special magical energy. Okay, magical is a bit of... it's not quite fair, but a special kind of energy that only occurred in life and that was the causative agent for life and that couldn't just dissipate into nothing. So, it would form smaller, some supposedly simpler organisms when an animal was left out to rot or something. Or if you ate that animal, so like let's say you slaughtered a cow and ate it, rather than that vital energy manifesting into, say, maggots, instead you took it in and you added it to your vital energy. And that's what the whole point of eating was, right? Well,
at the same... Okay, sorry.
So it turns out a number of experiments were done on the idea of vital energy. So for instance, it was proved that electricity could cause the muscles of dead organisms to twitch, which meant that they weren't actually animated by some kind of vital energy. They were animated by just normal old electrical energy. And then we started to investigate the chemistry behind things like digestion. And it turns out that, in fact, digestion is not you absorbing the vital energy of something. It's just chemical reactions in your body. And then finally, when experiments were done involving things like, S-curve tubes that would allow air but not any fine particulates into a pot of chicken broth, it wouldn't turn cloudy. Or if you put a fine cloth mesh over a piece of meat in a glass container, maggots wouldn't appear, although it would start to rot. And that finally disproved one of the last vestiges of vitalism, which was spontaneous generation. And that's about, after all those things were demonstrated, that's when the scientific community just abandoned vitalism and decided that life could be explained according to the normal physics of the rest of the world. Life wasn't separate from physics or chemistry.
I do believe that miasma theory, before that predated germ theory, was also connected to vitalism.
That might be. I'm not sure.
But I don't remember which one we abandoned first. So.
I don't either. But the thing is that so spontaneous generation is a very specific idea. It regards vitalism and things like this. And none of this is connected at all to abiogenesis, which doesn't claim that there's any kind of vitalizing spark that comes out and reorganizes non-living matter into full-fledged living organisms. It simply says that chemistry can result in self-replicating, evolving systems, granted, through a somewhat convoluted process, but one that's plausible. Now, we don't currently have a great theory for it. We're not sure how it came about, and it's not clear that we will ever know for certain. And even if it didn't, hey, Ilya Moon, Ilya Luna, my goodness. Change your name, got me all confused. Anyway, how are you? We'll hit play now.
Years ago. Many years, 150 years ago, there were recipes in some of the books how to make mice. Put rags and old food in a ball, old rags and some old food in a ball, and throw it in the corner and leave it for 3 weeks. And it will turn into mice.
Well, yeah, that's spontaneous generation, like I just described. And also, if you follow that recipe, you'll probably get mice. They just won't have generated inside the ball.
Well, duh. And so a guy named Francisco Redi and Louis Pasteur both did experiments to prove that life only comes from living material. There'd be two scientists you ought to know the names of, Francisco Redi and Louis Pasteur, where we get our pasteurization of milk.
It wasn't Louis, it was Louis, but whatever.
Pasteurized. Doesn't mean this high, it means he's a French guy, okay? Not pasteurized, but pasteurized.
Oh, that was another joke that didn't
Louis Pasteur and Francisco Redi, just Redi and Pasteur would be good enough for me on a quiz, two people who proved spontaneous generation is wrong.
Yep.
Now the word generation...
You got that right, I'm taking a drink.
...comes from the word where we get the word for genes. To be regenerated... The Bible talks about being regeneration. To be regenerated is when you get born again, when you accept Christ as your Savior. You are re-gened.
God. If he says that becoming a Christian changes your genome, I'm going to take like 2 drinks. I don't know if that's where he's going, but I want to find out. And look, you know what? Here's something. 1 in the chat if you think that Bent Hovind is about to say that Christians have a new genome. 2 in the chat if you think he's not that bad. He's not going to quite go there.
All right, I'm gonna do somewhere in between where I think he's gonna say that when you're born again and you go to heaven, you have a different, just to be different.
Okay, that can be 3. You get a new genome in the resurrection. Okay, maybe that's where he's gonna go. And I mean, whatever. There's no way that there's no evidence for or against that, so whatever. But I honestly think it might be a 1. I think it might be the case that Bent Hovind is about to tell me that Christians get a new genome when they convert to Christianity. And looks like... So Maya's undecided, but Don Giovanni, Tesla Ranger have a 1, Captain Gargoyle has a 1. Ratchet Freak has a 2. Ratchet Freak has some faith in Kent. So... Alright, let's see what happens.
Like, is it supposed to be like some kind of upgrade? Like you downloaded it from... like I don't know.
I mean, presumably it better be an upgrade. Otherwise, why would you become a Christian so you can get worse genetics? All right, let's see what he says.
You get a new gene code. You're a new person. Regenerated.
Yeah, I'm going to count that as him saying that you get he just said you get a new gene code. I'm taking 2 drinks for that. I can't even... I want to see his evidence for this. You get a new gene code when you become a Christian, apparently.
Hey, Kent doesn't have a very good track record of even proving that he paid his taxes, so he's not really big on evidence.
That's fair, but the thing is, like, this is a new one for me that Kent Hovind apparently, at least at this point, thought that Christians were genetically distinct from non-Christians.
Yeah, I'm only familiar with more of the modern version of the contemporary, I should say, not modern, because he's not modern. But this, I feel like he's probably abandoned this since then.
I hope so, but like, when does Kent Hovind ever change his mind on science? I mean, oh my goodness, I'm taking another drink. I just can't. That is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard from anywhere. I'm going to hit play because I can't do anything else. I can't keep talking about this.
We might need a new worst creationist argument you've ever heard after this.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, if you guys didn't see it, I was on Erica's channel last week talking about the worst creationist arguments we'd heard, and it was me, Dr. Dan, and Erica Kutzer-Gibbon. And mine was the idea that mainstream science says that every dinosaur that ever has been fossilized was killed by the asteroid that made the dinosaurs go extinct. Well, they're not avian dinosaurs, but whatever. And that was the worst. And that was the worst that they had heard. But I think this might beat that one. So after this, I'm going to have to go inform Dr. Dan and Erica that I just heard this one. And I don't know if they'll believe me, but... All right, here we go. Let's get a little bit more cancel.
That'll preach right there.
No, it won't cancel.
So, the evolutionists believe that this first life form, whatever it was, 3.9 billion years ago, found somebody to marry.
Kent, you already were talking about the idea that evolution didn't say that sexual reproduction was the original form of reproduction, so I'm going to take a drink because you just contradicted yourself about evolution.
I mean, yeah, binary fission is a thing. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Now, just hold on a second. Going from non-living material to living material is a giant step.
Okay.
And then going from something that's alive to something that's able to reproduce is another gigantic step.
Nope, I'm going to take a drink because it's the same step.
It's a criteria for being alive.
Yeah, in fact, many things that aren't alive reproduce. Like I said, strands of RNA can self-catalyze both protein creation and their own synthesis, and hypercycles, which don't have genetic material, reproduce and have metabolism. So it's actually not that big a deal.
And the self-catalyzation by RNA, I believe that also counters. I don't know if it's one of Kent's, but I've heard from other creationists that only protein synthesis can only occur in the presence of ribosomes. Which I mean, if you have self-catalyzation of Also, there's a reason that the core of a ribosome molecule is a strand of RNA. You don't what?
Yeah, it's because ribosomes are essentially the evolutionary product of bits of RNA being selected for and having other molecules accreting onto them for the purpose of more efficient protein synthesis.
Yeah, it's just the same scaffolding. It's just we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We've already got the stuff established.
Yep. So there you go.
Those are just brushed over in the textbooks as if, well, it must have happened because here we are.
No.
I asked an evolutionist in a debate, can you please explain how do we get from just living organisms to sexual reproduction in living organisms? And he said, well, it's a much more efficient system because it mixes the genes of the mother and the father.
I mean, that's why it persists. I'll agree. That's not how it happened. So yeah, that person did not answer the question asked, which is one of my pet peeves, which Josh knows about because he does that a lot to me. So
to be fair, that's because
I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm not saying you're trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying it's true. You don't have to be defensive about it. I don't hold it against you. I'm
not being defensive. I'm just clarifying.
Fair enough.
It's an honest misinterpretation.
I'm not saying it isn't. It just happens a lot with you and I. I ask you a question and you answer a different question that you think is the question I really want answered, when what I actually want answered is the question I asked.
Yeah, and if you tell me I didn't answer the question, I clearly misinterpreted. Please clarify, expound, and
I'm not saying you're a bad guy. It's not a big deal. We'll just continue on with Kent Hovind. You're fine. We're good.
Yeah,
we're good.
Well, because it's a better system doesn't explain how it got here, does it?
Yeah, no. You know what? I'm going to take a drink because Ken is right. That is a bad answer to that question.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think another part of the problem why YEC tends to persist is that the most vocal opponents of it, because most scientists, they're like, I want to go back to my job and do my work. I don't care about dealing with these idiots.
Yeah.
Or like vocal, smug atheists who are convinced evolution is a thing but aren't really well versed enough to defend it are their main interlocutors. So it's often weak positions that the YECs can attack.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing about, like, scientists who respond to young Earth creationism. None of them are doing it as a serious part of their academic career. It's just the same as, like, a PhD who's responding to Flat Earth. No one takes this seriously. No scientist takes young Earth creationism as a real threat to their ideas or to mainstream science or has any illusions that it's going to overturn anything. It's just fringe nonsense that crazy people believe that has no bearing on actual science, hasn't had an impact on actual science in decades. At most, they get animated about it when some kind of creationist tries to get their nonsense tossed into a school. And so the kinds of scientists who are willing to go and debate Bent Hovind are just doing it for funsies, right? That's why of the major sort of creationist debunking people aren't actually scientists. Like, I'm not a scientist. R.J. Downard isn't a scientist. Logic isn't a scientist. Apologia isn't a scientist.
I mean, I'm an engineer, but one thing that I hate about a lot of engineers is that they fashion themselves as scientists when there is a clear distinction between engineers and scientists. Like, yes. I don't do research.
Yeah, scientists do research. Now, you can do research with an engineering degree, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
You can be someone with an engineering degree who is a scientist, but you have to actually do research.
Some of my colleagues do research.
Miguel Francesco Algar says, how to deal with YECs in the wild. So most YECs are just people who happen to believe young Earth creationism because they go to a church that does. And like, they're not out there arguing for it, and they're not researching it. And in those cases, I just go, yeah, okay, whatever, fine. Just leave it. When it comes to professionals, that's when it can be worth it to bother to argue, but don't just argue with them if they're the only ones recording. If you're going to argue with a professional young Earth creationist, make sure that you're recording it, so that way that can benefit other people, not just you. That's one of the reasons why, like, I don't, like, even before COVID, I wasn't going out and talking to, like, my friends and family who were young Earth creationists about young Earth creationism much, because I was unlikely to convince them, and it wasn't going to benefit anyone else. So,
yeah, like the few people in my life that were younger creationists, like I understood that if they wanted to talk about it, like I didn't harangue them about it. You know, if they wanted to talk about it, I'd answer any of their questions. Most of my immediate family are still, and it's largely because they're unconvinced.
Drink for Godzilla.
Yeah, but yeah, if they want to, like, any questions they have, I answer. If they don't want to talk about it,
yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, answer questions honestly. I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't have a huge amount of import in the everyday lives of the average person. Yep. So why would you throw away otherwise important relationships in your life over it?
I'm gonna let Bent Hovind finish this statement, and then we're gonna wrap up real quick. And then I would suggest everyone go over to Dr. Dan's channel, because if I remember correctly, he's premiering a video at the top of the hour. So head over there. Here we go.
That's not an explanation. And if you read...
Okay, well, that was it. Yeah, I agree, Kent. It's not an explanation. I'll take another quick drink. Bad answer. But, okay, channel news. There is going to be a Thursday video. It's going to be an unusual video for me because since it's Christmas, it's actually going to be themed... it's going to be about Christian history because, as I was once asked indirectly by a flat earther in Questions for Atheists, even though I'm not declaring myself an atheist, but whatever. Did you know that Christmas is a Christian holiday? To which the answer was, yes, I do. Thanks. But anyway, Thursday's video is called Atheist Myths, the Council of Nicaea, and the Bible, and it is a quick overview of how the Council of Nicaea came to be, the role of Saint Nicholas in the council, which is rather amusing, as well as Constantine the Great, his role in the council, and the development of the canon, and to what degree there is a connection between the development of the canon and the first Council of Nicaea. I should specify there were. Actually, I think there were 3 Councils of Nicaea. Now that I think about it, but don't quote me on that, because once I get past Chalcedon, I'm a little iffy on which council was which. Anyway, so yeah, that'll be Thursday. I do not have anything on Saturday. I'm pretty much after Thursday just probably gonna take off up until next Tuesday. I'm just taking some time. It's it's Christmas time. Ilya Moon says it's a pagan holiday. I might end up at some point doing a video about the pagan roots of Christmas traditions and whether Christmas was created as sort of like a Christianization of pagan holidays per se and whatnot. I don't know. It's less interesting to me than story of the First Council of Nicaea and the Nicene Creed and the Biblical Canon, which are they're more important events in Christian history, and I'm someone who's fascinated by Christian history. Also, the first organism in the Speculative Evolution Project Phase 3 is up on the World Anvil now. The art is... I'm redoing a little bit of the art. I don't like the water as much as I would like. So I'm redoing the water a little bit. So other than that, a slight change to the art. That creature is finished. It is a quote-unquote plant. So if you like the Speculative Evolution Project that is coming along, I did give about a week or so for lots of submissions to come in so I can actually start going through them. And also I was working on getting a few other things finished before I really dove into it. But from now on, I'm going to do at least 1 or 2 a week, I think, until we get the first video out. I'm planning on doing 8 organisms per video on that, just like I did for Phase 2. So, and I'll probably close submissions in like a month or 2. So, I think that's it. Josh, do you have anything that you want to plug? I mean, I know you don't have a huge presence on YouTube, so maybe not. But if you do, let me know, or let the audience know.
Currently, I don't have anything to plug, although there may be some stuff down the line, but it hasn't really happened yet. So I think it'd be presumptive to plug it before it even exists. So.
Well, I do know, from what I understand, you're interested in talking to a few different people, maybe on Modern Day Debate, or if that's not working out as a venue, I'd be willing to host a debate with you, as well as perhaps afterwards an after show. So there is that. So I think that's it for us. Please head over to Dr. Dan's channel. It's called Creation Myths, if you can't find it. Sometimes I search Creation Myths plus Neanderthals because it's one of his more popular videos about Neanderthal genetics. And that's 2 words, creation space myths. It's the channel with the, I believe it says I think for the channel icon, and all the videos have a sort of a Darwin fish eating a creation, the word creation, as like a major element in the thumbnails. The thumbnails are sort of minimalist, black and white, white background, black text. So please go check that out. Dr. Dan does really good content, very high level stuff. I mean, he's a geneticist, he's a virologist, he's a professor at Rutgers U. So yeah, great guy. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur, and here is my end credit.
Dr. Dan, what is the name of his channel? Because there is actually a doctor. Okay, because there's a Dr. Dan channel, which is a completely different.
Yes, it's Creation Myths, as I had said, Josh.
Just wanted to make sure everybody knew.
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I'd like to say a special thank you to my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bent Hovind, Jimmy Perry, Ian Chen, Sphincter of Doom, Chris Love, and Henry Hutanen. All of their support helps make this channel possible, and if you'd like to join the team, links to both join the channel as well as the Patreon are down in the description. Tiers start as low as $1, and they get you access to the exclusive patron-only Discord server, as well as early access to almost all of my videos. However, if a monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there are links to my Teespring store, and of course, liking and sharing this video always helps. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.